The strange thing about it is that
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming on a Sunday morning. We're very happy to have you there. I will just start with many warm and grateful thanks to all 6 of you, our guests, for coming a long way to Paris to have this round table, and we are so glad and proud and happy to have you here, so thank you very much. So, with no further ado, let's begin this roundtable about international co-production. And maybe the first question would be to each of you. Where do you come from and where do you currently live? And maybe you could tell us a bit about the countries you've been working with in your career and the countries you've been in touch with in the projects you've edited.
Okay, nice. Hello. My name is Sarah McTeague. I'm here as part of the Italian delegation. So I've been working in Rome for 20 years, which is basically my working career. I've worked with American productions, British productions, and Irish, basically, because English is my mother tongue, and in Italy that's what was useful, I guess. I worked for about 14 years as an assistant editor, and my experience with co-production is mostly as an assistant editor. And now I edit feature films, mostly first-time directors, and a couple of documentaries I've done too.
Good morning, my name is Patrick Minks. I'm from the Netherlands, I'm Amsterdam based. And for the last, 25, 30 years I've been editing mostly documentaries, a few feature films in fiction. And for the last 10, 12 years, quite a few co-productions. A lot of Dutch-Belgian co-productions, but also a Greek film, Serbian, Bosnian, and lately I've sort of moved towards Asia because I've done a few Korean productions, consult on Korean productions, and even Chinese animation films last year. And these are all real co-productions, so with Holland, weirdly enough, but about that more later.
Hello, good morning. My name is Alexander Berner. I am editing mostly feature films or high-end serial productions. I've worked in a lot of countries, so all over Europe, North America, England, South Africa, Azerbaijan, even Russia. So I had a lot of experience with co-productions and different people working together.
Hi, my name is Çiçek Kahraman and I am from Istanbul, Turkey. I live in Berlin. I have lived in Berlin for the last 5 years, and I have been working as a film editor for the last 15 years. I edit mostly feature films, mostly European co-productions, and lately series for digital platforms. I mainly work with Turkish films who are co-produced with other countries from Europe, like Netherlands, Bulgaria, Greece, France, and Germany. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Peter Alderliefste. I'm from the Netherlands as well, based in Amsterdam, and I've been working for the last 25, 30 years on mainly on features, and the last couple of years also a lot of series. I've been working, I've done one film in Germany, and now I just worked on a film in Belgium. And I've been working on a couple of international series from India, for Amazon India. And the other way around, a lot of Dutch productions are also co-produced. And so we work with lots of companies in Hungary, for instance, or Germany or France. So.
Alexandra Strauss, I'm French. I've been working also for 25 years maybe. I work on documentaries and features, and I've been involved in many films between Scandinavia and France, Sweden and Denmark too. and also with some Ukrainian on one project, and yeah, some American films, but well.
So this is quite amazing to see how many countries are involved. For those of you who have been moving out abroad in a different country, why did you do that, and was it related to the co-production situation? Cicek.
Yeah, I think I am to answer this question. I was born in Istanbul and I lived in Istanbul, and I was working there until 2017 when I moved to Berlin, Germany. One of the reasons I moved was because I had been working on a lot of co-productions, and a lot of them were co-produced by Germany. So by then I knew a lot of people in Germany in the industry, and so I thought I could make a living there. Also, the way the funding in Turkey works is, it used to be, it changed in 2020, but what it used to be was like Turkey was always funding as a main producer. So in co-productions, you have the main producer and the minor producers. And what happened eventually was, if you weren't a minor, if, for example, Turkey is the major producer in a co-production, what happened was all the funding that came from Europe had to be spent in Europe, which meant mostly post-production, because you cannot hire actresses from, or actors who speak another language, or you have, if the production is to take place in Turkey, you have to do that in Turkey. You have to spend money there. But then where do you spend the rest? What happens with the money that comes from Europe? So mostly co-productions, Turkish co-productions chose to spend the post-production money in Germany. So what happened was I started losing jobs. And I realized if I became German spending in their terms, I could still be working in Turkish co-productions, but be the German spending. So what I did was, in the last 2 years, well, since I came to Germany, I worked on 2 co-productions, which were mainly Turkish co-productions, co-produced by Germany. But I was a Turkish editor working on those films as a German editor, let's say, like German spending. So basically, yeah, this is one of the reasons I moved to Germany. And currently, the cultural policy of Turkey is changing. So they are now getting into co-productions. They're funding films. Let's say if it's a German film and
I have to move back to Turkey to do it.
yeah, so now the cultural policy is changing, so they are funding as minor producers, and let's say if you're if it's a German production and Turkey funds the film, so maybe I could go back to Turkey as a German, which is crazy. But I'm glad it's changing, because I had the luxury to be able to move to Berlin, but not many people can, and a lot of people are losing jobs for that. So I think it's a smart move on Turkey's part to balance that right now. It's a bit late, but better late than never. Thank you.
And Sarah, you moved to Italy quite early in your career, and so would you say that English being your mother tongue, did it have an impact on the jobs you could find there, or how did it start?
Thank you. Yeah, when I moved to Rome, I started working in Italian productions, and I was kind of a novelty foreigner that they could make jokes at, and I could learn Italian and be, you know, the novelty. So it was when the Rome TV series came to Rome, that I did the first international job, and I'm sure that being a mother tongue English speaker was useful for me, because I could speak English better than most people, which was probably an advantage in that way, and likewise with the other jobs that I did. They would have chosen me basically because of my language, which, but hopefully not all, only. I think, I'm sure there are other Italians that speak good English, and it's, you know, it's just about whatever, but I was lucky to get those jobs, so, yeah.
I would have a question for you coming from the Netherlands, Peter and Patrick, because the situation may be a bit different there. On the co-production side, you told me that you were often a minority co-producer, so the post-production is often in Netherlands and you have quite a great reputation for post-production, so you actually don't have to move anywhere else to find a job, but would you say that it's true? Or to work in international co-productions, I mean?
Well, that's my experience mostly, yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of, well, especially in what we call art house feature films and feature documentaries, there are a lot of minority co-productions done with the Netherlands. And it has to do with the structure of funding, because there is a possibility at the National Film Fund to apply for minority co-productions. There is the funding from the International Rotterdam Film Festival, Hubert Bals Fund, and there's the Beta Fund from ITVA. So on the feature side from Rotterdam and on the documentary side from ITVA. And those are not large amounts of money, but it can get up to 50 to 80,000. So that's mostly, very often post-production. And there's also a prize in Rotterdam, especially for post-production. So that means often sound design, mixing, grading, stuff like that is then done. Yeah.
Well, it is mainly, it was mainly the facility post-production, to be honest, because lots of movies that were shot abroad and came to Holland for post-production didn't find an editor, but did find grading, sound design, or visual effects. Excuse me. So we didn't really benefit from that for a long time, I think, and now it's starting to change a bit, I think. I don't know what it is.
But it means that you also work on projects where the post-production can be actually kind of split between different countries, for example, Belgium and Netherlands. So how do you deal with that reality that sometimes the sound editing will be in another country, or how do you follow the projects you're working on?
Well, it's really nice to go abroad and to be there for a while to do part of your job. In the Netherlands, it's not so used for editors to follow post-production so much. So we're trying to push that in because we think it's really important. But producers will just grab whatever they can get from different countries, basically, and then we have to persuade them to actually that people have to be there as well. Like directors are the first one to be taken to different countries, but the editor really needs to. We need to tell them that we're needed. But I kind of like it, and it also makes the standard for Dutch post-production facilities higher, because we can choose actually between the really good ones in the surrounding countries. So I kind of like it, but there was a time where the funding was so bad in Holland that there was no, like you had this sale and lease back or whatever, you had a tax refund when you didn't go to a Dutch company. So a lot of post-production went away to the surrounding countries, including editing, and that they fixed now. So now it's more in balance, I think. So I kind of like it.
Mm-hmm.
And Alexandra, what about you? Because you have a career filled with international co-production projects from many different countries. So how come? Is it a coincidence, or was it a conscious choice for you? How did it start?
I think it's coincidence, yes. Meet and encounters with people, and luck, and yeah. As they say, working for international co-production is always a question of where they spend money. So, and often, yeah, with our French system, with the Cinéma du Monde, often the editing could be in France. So it's, and then they take you to other countries because the producer wants you around. They prefer it, even if you're French. And then the language is very important. If you speak fluently, it really, yeah. I think my second work as an assistant already in the 90s was on a big series, European series in 35 millimeters, but they took me also because I already spoke sufficient English. So it was a German, English, French, Italian. I think it was like about Charlemagne. It was like a very long work. So and then it was lucky, yeah, because to meet people from Sweden was really a question of.
Can you tell us how you first met?
Roy Andersson?
Yes. What was the circumstances? Because
yeah, well, I think I answered to an ad of Pôle Emploi, which was the only time in my life. And first time I read it, I saw we're looking for French editors speaking fluent English, and I saw Roy Andersson. Wow! So how come they asked there? But I went there, and we spoke, and I went there. It was 15 years ago. So it was first time I spent a few months in Stockholm, and then after, I don't know, you meet people and.
And would you say that once you started working on these international films, maybe you also profile, you're more inclined to work on other films, right? People will trust you.
Everything, you're always in a drawer, so they think of you or not when you're in this kind of profile, yeah. Mm.
And Alex, what about you? Because you've been working on so many international big studio films as well. How did you first get your way to Hollywood?
To Hollywood, yeah? No. No, I was actually trained in London. So I forgot before to say I'm German, from Munich, Bavaria. I was actually trained in London. Then after a few years of training there to be an editor, I came back to Germany and was just very lucky to work with a producer called Bernd Eichinger, who did some really good and big international movies. So that was a reintroduction into international work then in the early 2000 years, basically. But I've worked on a lot of co-productions, of course, with money from different countries and different influences, and it's very interesting and quite amazing. Also because we were talking about before outsourcing work to different countries. So I think that's actually a chance that we have today, and I like that on co-productions, that you do have the chance to really work with the best people of different countries. For example, I did a movie called Miss Sloane, which was financed by EuropaCorps, but edited in Great Britain, shot in Canada, blah, 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 blah. So you're all over the place. And finally, we mixed the movie here in Paris with a very lovely mixer, whose English was not so good. But he was one of the few, but he still did a great job on mixing the movie. So, yeah, you get to know a lot of people, and you have the benefit of working with a lot of the best people. So that's about me.
Yeah. And one more question. This big studio film, they're quite often international co-production. There are money coming from everywhere. But I was wondering, is it only a financial co-production, or does it have an impact on the editing? Do they have a say on the editing? Do they watch the films?
Well, it depends. If you talk about Hollywood, you talk about studio money, and that is usually their money. So that's one thing. But if you do bigger productions, let's say around 60 million or something like that, between 60 and 80 million, of course a lot of countries are involved. And there is different schemes. One is that producers who have a project will actually go to the various markets, and they sell the project ahead. So everybody they sell it to is a co-producer. Sometimes you have the situation, and then in this case, they have hardly anything to say. They say something in the end if the project or the product or whatever you want to call it is suitable for their country. but otherwise they will stay out of creative discussions. But sometimes you also have the situation that a person has a great idea but doesn't have money. So a big producer will come and take care of the production itself and the financing and everything. But this producer, who might be a writer or a creative person, still has a big say on the production. Or to have another example, you might have a rich president of a country like Azerbaijan who wants to do a big feature film and put some money in the movie, and then suddenly his daughter is the co-producer and she has a big say. So I've had all these stories already. So I think it's always a big variation of creativity, money, and opportunity. Sometimes a person like Azerbaijan, for example, is the person has the opportunity to make you shoot there. So then he's a partner, and then he will sometimes have a say and sometimes not have a say.
I worked on a British TV episode last year, and what I was told is that it was pre-sold to 90 countries. So when we finished the episode, it had to go through the censor of 90 countries. Wow. So you have to cut up everything in the end, because the one censor wants the sex out, and the other one wants the wants more, and you know it's a complete mess in the end. So that is not a good experience to me.
But did you actually cut the episode with a list of notes?
But I was very angry doing it, and I never do it again.
A little more, but a little less, but. Okay, where's the point?
Yeah.
No, there were also 3 or 4 versions, but there was lengths and where the I don't know. I don't want to talk about it.
Can I add something?
Yeah, of course.
I was in 2010. I was working on a Turkish, German, and Netherlands co-production, and we were happy with the cut. It was 120 minutes long, which was okay for us. But the Netherlands producer told us that she couldn't sell it to television if we have it at that length. So basically, you have to compromise from your creativity in order for the film to profit, and that's always a challenge for us. We're not very happy doing that. But yeah, I mean, in different countries have different criteria for what to sell, who to sell it to, and how to sell it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if any of you have other experiences where there was at least 2 co-production country, maybe having a real say on the editing, and even as a producer, I mean, as a partner, not just at the end of the editing, but as an editing partner. And was it difficult for you in the editing room to have these 2 countries being equally interested in the making of the film? And how did you deal with those? Because it's already difficult to work with one producer, so how did you deal with at least 2? Maybe Alexandra on The Orphanage, that Alexandra edited The Orphanage, that will be shown this evening at 7 p.m., à 7h ce soir. Je vous encourage à venir le voir. Et Alexandra sera à nouveau là pour parler plus en détail de l'orphelinat. So yes, maybe can you tell us a bit about how it works?
I think it's really depend on people. I mean, how the characters of each producers. Normally you work in one country, so you have some producer around and being very talkative and creative with you, and then the other, they just give you they send you mails, or you have discussion on the phone, so it's different, yeah. But now with the COVID, it has changed a lot, because now everybody is at distance, so they are more equal, I think, than previously. Yeah, I've just finished a film from Singapore, and there were Singapore, Taiwan people, French people, and Portuguese, and it was quite interesting because they were very creative, all of them, very responding, and they were speaking together really well. But that's the characters of these people, I think that it was working very well. I think I've never been in between producers that have very different desires or expectations. no, not really. Yeah. Normally, everybody wants the good of the film, and try not. But TV is a little bit different. Maybe when it's more mainstream and you have to please kind of more people and this, I don't know.
Yeah. I have quite some experience with that, where I had different versions of movies because, as we said before, some countries have a different relationship to nudity. It's actually quite interesting. I'm not so negative about it because I always like the experience of learning how different countries accept different things. It can be sometimes the combination of blood and energy, or it can be naked nudeness is of course always a problem. It can be certain things that are said.
Smoking for China.
Yes, smoking, all kinds of little different things that make this country. And I think it's worth discussing it. I mean, if it's not as terrible as the experience that Peter had, it's very interesting and you learn. But also, like on a lot of productions, you also have to cut a airplane version, for example. I don't know, I've done quite a lot of airplane versions in my life, where certain things have to go, because you might have people from different countries sitting in the same airplane, and some of them can deal with certain things and others can't. Or, typical example, the crash, that's an easy one. But, you know, sometimes it's the moral. It's the moral of people. And that's interesting, and I think it's fair. Because that makes us all different and interesting.
Yeah. And do you find some pleasure as an editor to work on these versions? Because probably you have to ask yourself some narrative questions. How do you deal with these versions? Is it only something that you have to do, or is it also kind of fun creatively, I mean, to work around?
Well, I remember on Baader-Meinhof Complex, which was a movie about terrorism. That was a pretty tough one to get through all the countries and to make it possible to be seen in all the countries. And I took it as a challenge that some things which were forbidden in certain countries, you still have to somehow make a new cut that sells the idea, but in a different way. And that can be very nice. I mean, can be challenging and nice too, because you know, okay, they don't understand, they can't see this, but you want them to know that they are naked, so how do you do it? What do I have in the rushes to show that? I mean, using the naked as a simple example. Sometimes it's words, or you turn blood from red into black, also works sometimes. It's a lot of learning, and what I love about our job is learning, so I take it as a challenge, as I said.
But I think it's a really good idea to before you end the editing, you check in different countries how it will work out. But what I want to add, in the Netherlands it's not really used that the producers have a big, they tend to talk with us about how the movie should be, but they're not the decisive people who, in the end, at least on the smaller productions, in the end, the director is the one who's cutting all the edges, and he's saying what it's going to be. So that's, I think I'm not really used to working with different parties that have actually the last word in it. So I might be a little bit more uptight about it. Lucky too, yeah, in a way, yeah. But I like it to check if it internationally still works. I mean, that's the other way. It's not only about things that other people don't want to see or are not culturally accepted, but it's also like, how do you want to tell your story so that it is can be available for more countries than only your own country.
The universal language of movies.
It makes me also, this also makes me think that it goes also the other way around. That when something comes to me as a Westerner, my perception of things can change things in the storytelling. Because I gave you the little clip of the scene of the South Korean film. The scene continues with the film it's a documentary about the way that the South Korean army was involved in the Vietnam War, and they actually did quite a few massacres in villages in Vietnam, which is not known in the world. what the Americans actually did is hire the very poor South Korean government after the Korean War to get involved as mercenaries in a way in the Vietnam War. And we were editing, and at one point we were having lunch, and I was talking to the director, Borali Gill, about her experiences and how did she came about with this subject and blah, blah, blah. And she actually told me, she's in her early 30s, and she actually told me that the first time she was confronted with this story was that she took like a guided tour with a lot of her generation and other people. So South Korean people went over to Vietnam on a guided tour, and they visited the memorials in different villages where the South Korean army had massacred civilians during the Vietnam War. And I was like, excuse me? Why is this not in the film? And she said, why is it important? And I said, that's just crazy. You go to the country where your country did a lot of massacres, and then what do you do at these memorials? We apologize, she said. We go to, so they go to the shrines, and they stand in front of the villagers, the Vietnamese villagers, and they bow down, and they cry, and they apologize. And I was just baffled. So I told her, well, I mean, for us, that's just crazy. And for her, it was normal. It was the natural thing to do. So the sense of blame, collective sense of guilt in South Korean culture is like totally the opposite from our culture. I think also in France, I don't think any 25-year-old would go to Indochine to apologize, right? I mean, no way, not even on a guided tour. So I said to her, well, actually, why is this not in the film? Well, why was it not in the film? Because for her it was not important. It was such a normal thing to do for South Koreans that there was no point in it. And I said, but do you have anything? I might have some research material, she said, that I shot myself at the time. So we got the material. Luckily she had it with her in Amsterdam. And we sort of managed to cut a scene out of it. And I think what is important also is that she, as a director and also the South Korean producer, had international ambitions with the film. So this whole thing would not have been important if it had just been a South Korean TV documentary, for instance, for South Korean audiences. But their ambition was to take it internationally, to apply for it, send it in for festivals like that. And I think the fact that they have this ambition sort of influences then the choice to have this particular scene, this example of a scene in the film or not. So that's, I think, also an important thing. And
yeah. Speaking of cultural influence on the editing, Sarah, you worked as an assistant editor on This Must Be the Place by Paolo Sorrentino. And so this is quite an international aimed film for festivals. It's with Sean Penn, American star, but still an Italian film. And so could you, do you remember having this cultural difference between maybe the Italian and the US producers?
So yeah, it was definitely felt like a more of an Italian production. So although they shot in Ireland and there was a French and Irish co-production, the Americans weren't producers on it, but distributors.
Oh yeah.
So what I found was that the French and the Irish didn't have any input, but they were happy with the way the film was working. Paolo had a lot of say. It was his film. They just would see, screenings, and the big difference was when Harvey Weinstein came to see it. So he came to Rome. I'm not sure if he'd seen it already because he came with his story girl, so with her script, and she wanted to check that the film that was that the way the finished product came out was similar to the script, or if there was some way that they could make it better, which is kind of like, I don't know. I'll speak for myself, not for Paolo or the editor, but it felt a little bit offensive, because Paolo is, his style of direction is he's like an auteur. You don't kind of do that to Paolo to check his script. But he to make it more accessible to American audiences, he decided to put a voiceover. So there was an American version where he would explain to the public the things that they couldn't understand by themselves, you know. So he made that decision. We were a little bit baffled by that, you know, because we didn't think that it needed it, because there's some maybe passages that are quite poetic, but he explained it to them, you know, so we got a voiceover for that one. Luckily, the version that we have on Netflix now, I think, is the original version then that went to Cannes. So that was interesting.
And Cicek, so you've been working on many Turkish-German co-production. Do you feel that there's a difference between a Turkish film being produced only in Turkey, or when you have this type of co-production, do you feel that it's bending the editing a bit, that the film is also German? Is there a cultural mix, or somehow, or not at all?
Well, all the films I worked on had Turkish directors, so and they were auteurs. So basically, the producers, like I gave the example before, were mostly commenting on the length, but there was not major bending, because I mean they gave the final cut to the director. So it's not. I didn't have such an experience where I had, like you did, but except for like promotional stuff, but for like they didn't intervene creatively much. No, I was lucky. I was one of the lucky ones.
And I have also some more concrete questions. For example, you had to move to Berlin first, but then you had to move again, right, for a film. So can you tell us a bit about that?
That's a funny story, because I moved to Germany to be considered as German spending, but no one told me that there were regional funds. Like if a film is funded by median board, then you have to be registered officially in Berlin to work on the film. And if it's, let's say, funded by a Moin, like the funding of Hamburg, then you have to be registered officially in Hamburg, which means you have to live there. So that I had no idea about when I moved to Berlin. I just thought all the film hype was in Berlin, and all the people I knew was in Berlin, so it was the best place to move. But then this film came, and we were stuck with the question of what to do, because I was living in Berlin, and then what happened was I literally moved. There was no way of solving that, and I have to say German bureaucracy isn't helping at all in that way. It took my tax number 6 months to transfer from Berlin to Hamburg, which meant I couldn't get paid for 6 months. And then there were, like, the authorities didn't agree with each other, like the the tax authority did not agree with the municipality on certain things, so that we had to solve, and yeah, that was a challenge. And I physically moved. I can't believe I did that. My boyfriend was left in Berlin, and I lived in Hamburg for 1.5 years, because that's what you have to do. And then came the pandemic and the lockdown measures. I was in Hamburg living with the director. She also had come from Turkey. We were editing in Hamburg, a Turkish film, and luckily the post house didn't shut down. So it was us and another film that was actively editing there. So we were lucky that we still go to work, because there was nothing else we could do. We couldn't go back. Nobody knew when we were able to go back, and she couldn't go back to Turkey, so her Belgian boyfriend had to come and pick her up. It was crazy. So, yeah, the pandemic didn't help on top of that as well, but yeah.
But I could help you with a workaround next time. There is easier, because I have to do that all the time, and there is a lot of cheating involved. But we shouldn't talk about illegal stuff here.
This is why we organize this round table, so you can exchange some cheating. Yeah, well, did it have a concrete impact on your life working on this type of projects, whether working abroad for a few months, maybe leaving your family sometimes, or also maybe sometimes you have to work in a very unusual schedule as well, I think. So maybe, I don't know, Alexandra, you want to start and we can go around a bit.
My personal life?
Along the years, yeah. How do you organize yourself to?
Depends on your partner then. But it's always great to go abroad working 2-3 months. More, it's longer. But it's really great experience just to be in a foreign city. You are just there for work, and so you have time for yourself. It's great, I think, experience. Yeah. Yeah.
And
I think it's really hard to combine sometimes, and I lost some international productions because I didn't want to leave my family for so long. So I think it can be quite challenging, but it's also maybe a personal thing. Some people are better at that than others.
Bad mother.
No, not a bad mother.
Yeah. This is a harsh thing. Yeah, but what do you want to do? It's either earning money, it's not earning money. I always find it in a career, you can, every step is dependent on your next step. So you either do it or you don't. And I've spent many months and years abroad. Yeah. 13 months last year in Berlin. I've spent 10 months in Chicago. I've spent endless times in LA or in South Africa or whatever. I think you're perfectly right. 3 months is from now on my rule. But yeah, the cool thing is you learn a lot. The cool thing is you meet a lot of new people. You adapt your way to work sometimes even. But it's complicated.
Well, and maybe there are quite some productions where you don't need to. I mean, you told so a couple of minutes ago. Lots of productions can come to my place to be working with me on an international feature.
But then it's the directors actually moving, right? Usually.
Yeah, that's true. But
yeah,
that's his problem.
I can manage everyone's life, you know.
Absolutely.
No, but it does influence also. I did a Greek feature film. The director, Yanis Rafa, has a young child of 3 years old at the time, and she didn't want to come to Amsterdam for long periods of time. So what we ended up doing was that she would come for 7 days, and we would work 7 days straight. So that also impacts a lot of things. I mean, it means it was these 3 periods of 7 or 4 periods of 7 days were really, really intense. We worked long days because you sort of feel, you know, in these 7 days you set a sort of goal. We have to reach more or less somewhere there. And that differs a lot from if I would have gone to Athens for 3 or 5 or 6 months to do the whole thing there, or if she had the opportunity to just stay in Amsterdam. So it influenced, I think, also the process, because in this case we had to cut it up, and when we were together it was really intense. And I also remember with a Malaysian film, I came in after the director made a first rough cut. We started for a couple of weeks in Kuala Lumpur, in Malaysia. Then we had a break. We both worked on stuff in our own places. Then we came back again, and for reasons I will not go into, we ended up editing again in Indonesia, on the island of Bali. And then the whole post was done in Thailand, and I was unfortunately not able to come to Bangkok for the post-production. That was a pity. But what happened there is that it was funny because the film was mostly in the jungle of Malaysia. And I'd never been to Asia, so I didn't know what it felt like, literally, to be in that tropical environment. So when I came to Kuala Lumpur, we started editing at the facility, which was all completely air conditioned. But during lunch, we had to go out, and it was funny because somehow the air density and the heat, sort of during lunch, sort of affected my idea of the images I saw on the image on the footage. And later on in Indonesia, we actually worked within the tropical environment without air conditioning. And that was also quite interesting, that you sort of get into the place where the film is sort of shot, and as someone from the Netherlands, you get this experience. Also, this is what it actually feels like. And in the film, there was this scene where like about 50 to 100 men carried a wooden house through the jungle, and they actually did it. It was a bit of a Fitzgerald kind of scene. And sitting in this heat and watching this video, I'm going, this is just crazy that they're doing, because I could really smell the sweat of the scene, and that was interesting too. Yeah.
Could I say something?
Yeah, of course.
Sorry, it's not me. I think it's quite interesting, and maybe just talking about families, and maybe even the difference between being a man or a woman in terms of traveling. You know, and I think it's interesting what Alexander said and Peter said about family. Just from my experience, I had an opportunity to work in New York on the end stage of Miracle at St. Anna. We were negotiating, because the film was in German, English and Italian, it would have been useful to have me as the assistant editor to give continuity in terms of language as well. It was also a bit complicated to work in America for a European in terms of visa, etc. But we were working on that. And I found out I was pregnant. So I decided then that I would not go. You know, so I think it was a decision that I was happy to make. But it feels that at some stage with our job, you need to make a decision between family or career. You know, I'm sure everybody has the same, queries. I had another opportunity but I had 2 young kids to work, perhaps, but I turned it down again, on Game of Thrones, which for me would have been perfect because of HBO experience and in Ireland. But again, I think with 2 young kids, it didn't feel feasible to go, because it was a long-term project. You know, so I think it's something, you know, for, I guess, maybe younger people to think about when they're getting, you know, it seems a shame to have to kind of choose between career and family, but I think sometimes that does happen. Well, at least I don't know what everyone else thinks. Or, you know, as my kids get older, it makes it easier to travel, but I think I would be similar, that I wouldn't take a job for a long time in a different country. The same for my partner. He may go away for work for a few weeks, but if it becomes months, it's very complicated for family life. You know, so our choices of career are to do with where it's based. You know, so. Sorry.
I must say something there, though. It's also the money. I mean, it's not only career and family. It's you need to earn money, and this is in some areas more difficult than in others. Just want to add that, of course, because you get used to a certain standard of living and things, and then you have to go where the money is that pays that sort of life. So it's exactly what you said, but on top of it, it can be a money issue as well.
And I wonder as well, with these international projects, is it harder to grow a relationship with the director? How do you deal with that fact? Because, of course, they also go where the money is. So how do you grow a relationship as an editor with the directors you work with?
I think if you have the opportunity to at least spend some time physically in the same space, you're sort of all right. And the longer the better, of course, the more intense the better. I've done now 2 projects online, actually, as a consulting editor. So the work was done by the director. It's the Chinese animation film I talked earlier about. And we spent every Friday morning on Skype for 4 months. So especially because it is animation, the work had to be done by him. So I would watch stuff, and then we would talk for a whole morning and go through the stuff. And that's how we built the whole thing. I was actually quite surprised how close we got in a way. But no doubt it would have been different if he would have been able, if COVID hadn't happened, and he would have been able to spend time either in the Netherlands or me in Beijing. And the other one was also Chinese, was also distanced a couple of years ago because she couldn't come. She ended up with the mixing, she did come to Amsterdam. And another one was a Japanese director, and his English wasn't very good, so there was a lot of translation going on with the Dutch-Chinese co-producer, and I found that really tough. I didn't feel I just couldn't connect. There was the distance because everything was online, plus the language barrier, not being able to talk to him directly and get a direct response. I think a lot of stuff got lost in translation there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, talking about translation, this is one of our main topics and one of the last. How did you find yourself working on foreign languages that maybe you didn't always speak? How did it work? Maybe Alexandra, you can tell us a bit, because you worked with many languages, right? Many different ones.
Yeah. Depends, of course, if it's fiction or documentary, because in fiction you have some kind of not so many rushes, and everything should be subtitled, so it's easier. I would say that documentary, when you have a big amount of material, and I think now that I would not take any more documentary work when you don't really know the language. I think you are too behind. But then there is, of course, the relationship with the director, which is when you don't know the language as Farsi or Chinese, it has to be there all the time. But I think it has a big impact on the work because you have to think about the subtitling all the time. So I always think you have to make a more slow film, in fact, when you have a lot of read. That's really something you have to take this in the count, that people have to read all the time, so you have to make more space for them to take the emotions, to take the story, but also to read. And this is very important, I think, when you work often with subtitled films. Yeah.
And you told us that you were working very precisely with the subtitles during the editing, and you were actually working yourself, not the assistant, but you're working.
Yeah. I think the rhythm of the reading is one of the material, like sound or music, or it really counts in how long it is when it comes, and just like the rhythm of the voice also. I don't know how you feel it, but when you read subtitle and you know the language like English and you see it's earlier or later, or it's really disturbing. So I think it's very important to take it as a material. And you on the Charbonneau's films, it's very important because they are talking all the time, and it's a very rich language with a lot of repetitions, and so it's really based on them speaking all the time. So you have to. So it was kind of difficult to learn where to cut, of course, because when you never hear where they stop a phrase, it's really. But when with the director, it's okay, and then you get used to. But subtitling is really important for you because you are in between the audience and the director. So you are kind of a translator of more than the language, more than film, but really you have to take in everything in your work.
Bad preliminary subtitles can fuck up your scene. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. And I've noticed that hardly anyone can watch through these sort of mistakes. And I also think even in the Netherlands, a lot of people think they can understand English really well, but they really don't. It's an idea that you can understand. But if you have to read English subtitles while hearing Swahili in a rough cut with rough translation in bad English done by people in Tanzania, then you know, what the hell are we watching actually? And for me and the director at the time, it wasn't. It's different because you're repeating the material. You're going through the footage every time, but even we often wanted. We have no idea what this translation means. So what I really often do is just cut by cut, I make the subtitles better in terms of translation, in terms of rhythm, how it should be, because there are a lot of rules. You can look them up, what the rules of subtitling are. So at least in the end, when the producers are coming in or we have to present it to the funds, at least it's something watchable, because you really take a big risk, I think, if you don't do it. Because it will mean a lot of people in screenings, preliminary screenings, will not get the film. They will miss things. Although it's there, they will miss it because it's just badly translated, or the subtitle's too short, or it's too long, it gets annoying, and they get out of the thing, and it's I mean, it's much better now, technically, than it was like 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, so it's getting better and better, and I think also, apart from translation, it means that the technology gives us the opportunity to have, even in documentary with a lot of footage, at least slowly the opportunity to have rushes already, more or less subtitles. But it's, you have to deal with it, but it's actually quite annoying in a way.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I've just done a documentary about Jerry Conlon, who's a man from Belfast. And as I was editing the documentary, I put the subtitles on as I had the first cut. And I think it's interesting what you're saying about how the subtitles can influence your editing, because I found that the subtitles are going to stay for the English version because his accent is quite strong accent. And then to not discriminate between a Belfast accent and London, we kept English subtitles for the whole documentary. But I think it's interesting that you don't want to confuse the viewer, you know, so you tend to edit with the subtitles in mind, that you continue to have a nice rhythm, or, you know, not have a phrase changing in the middle of a picture cut with the, you know, so you try to simplify it. And I think that's an interesting element of documentary editing. And also in terms of maybe if you have the name coming up, you don't want to have the name and the thing to read two things together. So I think working with the subtitles is very useful rather than doing it at the end, even though it's my language, you know. But
I would like to say something about the languages, because that's, I think, a very important part, and especially of international editing now, where you move from country to country. What I find very hard as an editor is sometimes to really know if whatever language I'm cutting, if what the actors, that's more in drama, what the actors come across with this is correct. I already find that hard if I look at Canadian and American accent and British and Irish and whatever. Are they really honestly doing their performance properly? So I would always suggest, if somebody has to do that, to get a native speaker. And especially if it's a language that you don't understand, like Japanese, or I've done a series once with which is called Origin, which had people from all over the world. Was a bit of this, was a bit of that, was a bit of that. And really, then I got a Japanese person in and showed him the Japanese scenes to make sure that what comes across is really face and language is correct, because that can be quite terrible. I've done one movie in Russia once, 9th Regiment, where it was Russian and I had a simultaneous translator next to me telling me exactly what word is what and what sentence. So sometimes they were talking too long and I wanted to shorten the sentences. And I said, what is this word? What is this word? What is this word? Yeah, this and this. Okay. Then I went, cut it all. So now he's saying it properly. And she said, no, he's saying something completely different. And I was like, what? Yeah, Russian, you know, if you say it this way around, it's not the same. So it's always good to have a native around.
Yeah, well, this is my next question.
Essential.
This has to take so much time. So how do you deal with this? Is it extra time, extra assistance? Cicek, for example, can you tell us about...
I edited a Kurdish film once, which was all in Kurdish. It was called The Voice of My Father. And from the title, you can tell sound had a lot sound and words had a lot to do with the film. Basically, it was a Kurdish father sending, back in the 80s, sending tapes to home because he was working away from the family as letters. So his voice on the tapes were used as voiceover from time to time in the film, and it was all scripted, so I was okay with that. But when I did not have the director in the room and I was editing myself, even though it was scripted, sometimes the actors were improvising because some of them were not professionals. I couldn't tell the difference. And I realized I grew the tendency to avoid words. So what happened was eventually it had a creative consequence on the film, which could work for the film or not. I mean, that you can never know that. So it might actually ruin your film if you do not bring someone in who speaks the native language. And also, time-wise, yes, we need more time, especially if we are not editing in a language that we do not speak, because we need translation, maybe we need to go back and check, or we need more time with a assistant, or talking to the assistant who is probably should be a native speaker, or to the director. So that means more time in the editing room and more money for the producer. So this is not usually something that they voluntarily go for.
Yeah. Yeah, there's one other thing that I came across, and that's culturally, I mean, if you ask a Dutch person, is this correct? And they say yeah or no. But if you ask an Indian person, if you cut around the scene and you think it's really good, and you ask, is this any good? I don't know what that means. I mean, it took a long time to get to know what the actual thing was, what I had to do in this production, because I couldn't read the reaction of the people who had to judge it.
Yeah, and you had quite an experience with these two Amazon India series, right? And one of them is not even in Hindi, it's a even more complex language.
Yeah, like a mountain language that even the assistant didn't understand, so. But, and I had to do that all online because it was during the pandemic, so the one who was gonna be, it's partly in Hindi and partly in the mountain language. The one who was gonna help me with the language, which is already very challenging with someone in India and over the phone, couldn't understand half of the dialogues herself, so that took some time. I had the director actually coming in all the time, also online, to guide me through all the takes and to find a way to, to make a scene shorter, or to tell a little different story in a scene or in a sequence. That's really, really hard when you're not sitting next to each other and you just can grab the language like it should be.
So we have only a few minutes left, so maybe you have some questions. Are there any questions maybe in the room? Yes?
Hello everyone, thank you so much for your stories. Especially after COVID, what I was wondering, you guys briefly mentioned working online. Does it ever happen to you that you now work more and more without the director being present next to you and finishing entirely a cut without the director being there, so talking, like giving notes, and like sharing notes online, and maybe even like maybe you meet just towards the end and maybe lock the image like that. How do you find that workflow? Does it work for you, or you rather always have the director present? How did COVID change your workflow also? Thank you.
Well, I tried not to change it at all. I tried to have the director as much as possible next to me, because if it's not only convenient for director to be away and to have you working on the film for a while, but it's very convenient for producer to not have to regulate or make sure that you can be together. So you really have to push, in my opinion, you really have to push to be sitting together at any cost.
Yeah, I think so too. Even meeting each other really regularly for a long time, I did feel I had a connection with Lele, but I also feel that the process would have been different. I mean, even under normal circumstances, sometimes some directors tend to be quite absent for reasons of their own. And I never feel that it's the right way to work, in the sense that if a director misses steps in the process that you are making, train of thoughts that you have had and he or she has missed somehow, somewhere at the end of the process it goes wrong. Because I think without really realizing, as a director, you have the sense that you're sort of losing grip of the process and someone else is running along with your film, and I think that fucks up the relationship and it fucks up the film. So physical togetherness, love, we need it.
Shall I say something about that? I think generally you're perfectly right, and it's really perfect to be together. But I have to say, one of the things I learned working a lot on commercial stuff, I mean on commercial projects, which are not always by the heart, you know, sometimes it's bread and butter, as we say. It can be quite good to have a director online, because you can shut him up. And that's really nice.
Really bad.
I just, yeah. So generally, yes.
You're on mute. I'm so sorry.
Yes. Doesn't work. Bye bye. Yeah. And then you do whatever you want. So devil's advocate, but generally you're right. Just there is a benefit.
Well, I kind of have to agree with Alexander on this because I think during the pandemic, all of us, like editors, directors, and producers, we realized that it could also be done online. I mean, it doesn't always have to be physical. So maybe I could move less next time.
Or pretend to be somewhere.
Yeah.
It's Hamburg. Look, there's a picture.
But it's when there are physical constraints for the two of you to be in the editing room, and then it's good to have an option for the work to get going. And it was a necessity during the pandemic, but I think it helped people see that it works. So there's always an option, and you can always offer that option. And when they know it works, then you have less convincing to do. So I find that quite positive on that side.
But it's true that now after the pandemic, as you say, you receive more proposals that you can work from home. Mm-hmm. And they really propose you say, you know, I'm not living in New York, and they say it doesn't matter, you can work from Paris. So, true. Yeah, it has changed the links. And then after, it's as usual, it depends with whom you're working. With some people it will work, with some it will not work, as you were saying there. You're working a lot and then they are behind, so they are feeling bad, the directors. But it's really a question of trust between you and the director also. And sometime with someone you have never met, it works very well, and sometimes it doesn't. It's really, and you can't know from the beginning. That's yeah.
But I do think it really works. It's a nice opportunity for consulting.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sure.
Which I've been doing quite a lot lately, and that's really nice.
Post meetings.
And yeah,
Post meetings can be done completely online.
Yeah, all those kind of more practical, but also on a consultancy level, watching scenes, watching cuts, consulting, talking on Skype, etc., Zoom, whatever. And I think it adds something nice to our trade. I mean, it's amazing that I've done consultancy now on a feature film from Kazakhstan. I don't know these people, but we're in touch with each other, and I look at the cuts, and there's progress, and it's really nice. And I don't think if the situation would have been not like it is now, that this would have been possible, or maybe possible technologically, but not accepted. by all of us. And I think that's a big difference. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing all your experience. It's really interesting. And I wanted to ask if you have maybe example of the fact that as you were working with foreign directors or that you didn't have the same native language or vision or culture, or that maybe you brought something in the film that was specific to you, to the fact that it was not your native point of view.
Yeah, I can answer that for myself because I was actually hired for this first Indian movie that was an Amazon series because they wanted a Western view on it, because it was completely produced within the Bollywood system, and they were very afraid that it was going to be released worldwide, and they were very afraid if other people would see it, they would not believe it or not understand it or completely find it ridiculous. So they asked me, and they were actually right, because it was not understandable at all, and it was quite ridiculous. So I hope that I changed it a bit so that it had more international impact.
For I'm Not Your Negro, of course, I got a lot of messages from American people, and they were so astonished that I was French. So I guess that when you have this distance and you don't have this very close acquaintance with some topics which are difficult, then you can have this distance and give it back to them to look at themselves. So, yeah, I think. Yeah, we were speaking about the content of international co-production. I think it has a big impact on the more maybe on the director's choices, because sometimes they don't know to who they are speaking. If they are speaking to making a film for their own country, natal country, or for European, and I think sometimes it puts the films, especially when you have sales agents and distributors, you narrow the film to some kind of festival, and you have to make some choices which are very not mainstream, but they have an image of Japanese film or Chinese film, and you have to, sometimes they try to make you go this way, and this is a problem for the films. Yeah.
Well, maybe this would be the last question. After all this talk, would you say that this international co-production, and it's probably going to grow in the next years, is it bringing more diversity to the projects because of all our point of views? Or do you sense maybe a risk of standardization as well? Now we have a more global impact, and every project might also look the same. So I don't know if it's...
Looking at me.
Yeah, because you have the microphone.
And you gave me the mic. What do you guys have in mind? Well, I think I can give you the example of Netflix, because I have been working with Netflix since they started producing in Turkey, which was 2017. And then we have been working together since, and right now I'm consulting. I work as a consultant for Netflix series besides editing. And I have consulted 2 French series. I'm currently consulting an Italian series, and I'm also editing Turkish series. So yeah, it has, I think, made these co-productions have an impact on the mainstream productions now as well, which I think is a good thing, because that's where the money is, and we need to be able to, as Alexander said, go where the money is. So, yeah.
I would like to add something to that. I think what's really cool is that we technically all improve, and that we all learn by working internationally, seeing internationally. I mean, the opportunity to see all these fantastic productions, be it from Spain, South America, Turkey, wherever, all over the world, it's great, and you can combine that into your work. What's really, we shouldn't forget though, or should never lose, is the individual character of our countries and what makes a French movie, what makes a Turkish movie, or whatever. So the diversity is very important and should always be there because that's how we learn from each other. But the technical improvement is, of course, a big advantage of that whole development.
Yeah, I'm not so afraid of it all being like a one pudding in the end. I think the algorithms of the streamers might, we have to take care that it doesn't go too much in that direction, but there's also, like we mainly talked about the normal co-productions that take money from a lot of countries just to make sure that it can be made. And that will never go away, I think, because then you get the best of all the countries, like you said before. And that's only a good thing, I think.
Totally agree with everything said before, but there is a risk. And I notice with myself that I am very aware of being a white male from Western Europe. And I think the awareness of it at least gives me a bit of opportunity to be confronted with others from other places in the world. But it's also the system, because with South Korean, I did a few workshops the last couple of years with young South Korean filmmakers, and especially the documentary in South Korea is very young. It's documentaries are mostly TV, Anglo-Saxon based, a lot of voiceover, blah 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 blah, very journalistic. And the new generation sort of looks at ITFA kind of documentaries as an ambition, and they want that. And I also think that festivals like ITFA are behaving in a way like, you know, you should be like us. Mm-hmm. And I sense directors, young directors, going, you know, like flies to the flame or the moth to the flame of these kind of festivals. And if I, as someone from Western Europe, and especially from Amsterdam, where ITFA is, and I can see in their eyes, they're looking at me like, you're going to tell us how we need to do this. And this I go like this, like, no, you do your stuff. You know, I want to help, I will look at your scripts, I will look at your rough cuts, I will consult on a narrative like a dramatist, but I'm not going to tell you how you're going to make an ITFA film, because never. Please don't go into that direction. But it's happening. I mean, the impact is there, yeah.
But we're advocating basically for individual pictures.
Of course. In the end, it's just, you know, us with that director in the room or in a distant room, and trying to make the best film we can. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
With all the character of the country.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a perfect last word. So thank you so much for all six of you for this roundtable, and thank you for being there. And as I said, we can all go upstairs and continue the discussion with a nice coffee or drinks.